get started just a little late. So Politics 101 is what I call this. So essentially, what is politics? Well, Congress and the legislature, they're a microcosm. I know that we all recognize and think, and I hear from physicians a lot that say, well, they should just do this. It's the right thing to do. It makes sense. Well, a wise man once told me, what you see at the parade depends on where you stand. You have a different view from where you are than where somebody else is. We've got auto parts dealers, we've got attorneys, we've got now 2 doctors, thankfully. But every person has their own ideas about how to fix society's problems. Getting anything done in this process usually takes a significant amount of compromise. Politics, by definition, is that art, the art of compromise. Giving up some things without compromising your key goals and your key beliefs and your key commitments. So, those of you who can't see this is a picture of a camel, otherwise known in the legislative process as a horse designed by committee. The committee sets out to design a horse and you end up with a camel. That's the compromise that often takes place. You start out with a vision that you're going to do this and you end up over here. So that's the world that we work in, and sometimes I think a lot of physicians have a difficult time understanding how they can do what they do for their patients while we do what we do in the legislative process and still affect positive change. So what is good medicine? So it's caring for patients to the best of your abilities, doing the best thing you can for your patients in an uncompromising manner. You've got to stay abreast of all the latest advances in technology. Medicine, good medicine at least, dictates that uncompromising dedication to your patients. Well, what about politics and medicine? Can they jive? We've got the art of compromise on one hand, somewhat potentially conflicting definition on the other hand, because good medicine dictates providing an uncompromising level of care. Can physicians care for your patients uncompromisingly, yet be engaged in a process that, quite frankly, by definition, requires compromise? Politicians, every single one, has ideas when they get elected. They have their beliefs and their key systems and the things that they want to see changed statewide, sometimes nationwide if they're elected to Congress or reside at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So these ideas become the policies they push. We've seen this work to our benefit and to our detriment. These policies become laws, regulations. Those laws and regulations, as I said earlier, they're in your business. They affect your practice. Physicians have got to be engaged in this process to make sure those laws and regs don't negatively affect you or the patient you treat. Everybody says, okay, well, how do we do that? Well, what I call, the example I use always, a 3-legged advocacy stool. With a patient, oftentimes you've got a multifaceted approach to provide that care, to treat the patient and get them back to an operational state. All 3 legs of this stool are vital. But all 3 legs in working order, the stool becomes a pile of toothpicks, I like to say. You can't have anybody who's ever sat, or any hunters in the room, in a box blind with a chair that's got one leg shorter than the others, and we all know that it just rocks. Well, if you don't have all the legs on the stool, it doesn't stand. So let's go through those 3 legs. Leg number 1 is lobbying. That's what I do, that's what Dickie does, that's what Mark does. But everybody asks, so what is lobbying? And I'm going to read this. For those that can't see it, you've got a member of Congress here. And a pencil is labeled lobbyist, and the pencil's writing, nobody tells me what to do or say. So everybody says, well, is that what you lobbyists do? No, that's not what we do. That's what the public thinks we do, but that's not what we do. Here's another one. A raspy-looking gentleman says, lobbyist, I have never conducted my business in a lobby. I work exclusively in gutters and basements. That's one that everybody really thinks is what we do. So if that's not lobbying, and I assure you that it's not, what is lobbying? It's the act of attempting to influence decisions made by public officials in an effective, concise manner. To include regulatory agencies as well. A lobbyist is a person with detailed knowledge of that system, the legislative system, the regulatory boards that affect your practices, and they can go forth with a strategized and effective, concise message and agenda to enact on your behalf. So what's a lobbyist and what's an advocate? That's another term that we use, and advocacy is the broader umbrella about what we do. Lobbying is advocacy, but an advocate is not always a lobbyist. I like to use the example of Wayne Lapeer, who's the CEO of the NRA, well-known figure. And then I like to talk about the guy who's at the sporting goods store who's railing about the Second Amendment. They both probably have really similar views on issues. But the difference is that Mr. Lapeer at the NRA knows who to talk to, what to say, and how to get things done. The other guy will talk to anybody that will listen. Sometimes you need both of those. But in terms of effectively advocating for an organization or a profession like ours, you want a lobbyist. So let's bring us to lobbying for medicine. We're always engaged with elected officials, State House and DC, talking about and working on the issues that affect the practices. We monitor them, like I said, at the State House and in Congress as well. Take our policies from the Board of Censors and from the House of Delegates. So what is lobbying? How do we do that? Well, we've got hundreds of bills. I think the last count that I saw this morning was 700 and something, which is about average for this point in the legislative session. So 700 bills affecting somebody else. And nothing happens in the legislative process that benefits one person and doesn't really gore someone else. Hundreds of those affect health care. Our list, which is bulleted, but it's on all of your tables now, bills of interest and agenda bills, that's just a concise list of some of the things that are going on right now. There's dozens and dozens of others, and there will be more, because we're only in the, not even at the halfway point of the session yet, that will be added to that list. We've got a proactive agenda. We've got that listed on that. We've publicized that in the Rotunda and in the new magazine, which is also on your table. So we've got bills we try and pass, bills we try and kill. I use the example of the workers' comp bill most recently that has been brought back up now at this point. But more often than not, we take an amendatory approach. There are sometimes bills that need just a little bit of tweaking to make them non-controversial for medicine. So that's probably the approach we take more often is able to amend the bill to be able to make it amenable. Leg number 2. So we've gotten through lobbying. I think everybody understands what that process is, grassroots. So what is grassroots? This is grassroots. This is 3 of our board members and a member of Congress, 3 anesthesiologists, an anesthesiologist, and a member of Congress from Maryland, Andy Harris. A bunch of residents working the halls of the Russell Senate building in DC. But this is also grassroots. For those of you who can't see, it's a rally of sorts held outside the State House a couple of years ago of advanced practice nurses trying to push their profession far into the practice of medicine, way beyond their scope of training. They've got signs and they're picketing and marching, and they're here today as well, I understand. So what is grassroots? In short, you are grassroots, each and every one of them. Grassroots lobbying is when you contact your legislators like we're doing today. Some of you will do it from home, calls, emails, etc., see them at the baseball game, at church, but being here as well. This is grassroots lobbying 101 today. The key contact network, which is now our VIP, come on in, our VIP system that works through that RAP index survey that most of you have taken probably in this room. That helps us streamline and figure out where our strengths are that we can attack on key issues. And we often need your help. So when you see an all call that comes out through the Rotunda or through the staff, or in the magazine, or just phone calls and emails, we're not crying wolf here. We're not crying wolf at all. We manage, on the lobbying side, we're kind of the, I guess you'd say, the special forces, boots on the ground here, working things every day. And oftentimes we can create enough confusion and enough problems on bad legislation to stop it. But sometimes we have to call in the heavy artillery, and that's you guys. It really is. I mean, you're voters in each and every one of those districts across the state. And those people are accountable to you every 4 years. And you need to hold them accountable. Not in a threatening manner, but in a manner that these are the issues that report to me. You're my representative. Whether or not you voted for them, these are the things that are important to me, and I need you to listen to me and take my concerns to heart. And we need you to take that survey. The link is out there on the board. It's also on the documents on your table as well. Grassroots is critical. You can rest assured let's use the issue of the advanced practice nurses here today. The other side of an issue will be well represented. They will be here. They will be pushing their issues. Oftentimes with medicine, you know, physicians are at the top of the heap, and you've got attacks coming from below. And it's a lot when you've got something that you want. Some of these groups that are not physicians that have, you know, restrictions in the law as to what they can practice and how they can do it. They've got an incentive. They are constantly pushing, trying to march up that hill, trying to push against the boundaries that are there for a reason, for safety purposes. But they won't relent. And physicians are always in a defensive manner, it seems like. Just by nature of what you do, the most well-trained individuals in the healthcare field, that's the position you're in. Doesn't mean we relent, but it means you've got to defend, you've got to push back. Some legislators will even keep a tally, come on in, when they have an issue that's a hot button. They will have their secretary or someone at their office keep a tally of people that call, pro, con, keep a column. And they'll look at that periodically. And sometimes that's their poll. That's how they gauge what their constituents say. So if you've got 10 people calling on an issue that's important to you, and you're on the other side of it, and you're the only person that calls, well, to them it looks like their constituency back home thinks this is not important to the doctors. I can just go with the other group on this. So it's critical to let your voice be heard when you see those calls to action from us. We'll talk about that. And this is one of the other things I get oftentimes for those that can't see it. I'm talking about Grassroots, about contacting your legislators. And they say, well, isn't that what you do for me? You're my lobbyist, that's what you do in Montgomery. Well, again, go back to the example of the Special Forces operation. We're very strategic, we're very surgical, I like to use that term, in our approach. Oftentimes it takes an all-out call to heavy artillery to get an issue to move one way or the other to benefit medicine and patients. So that's where you critically come into this picture. It's kind of a 1-2 punch. The rotunda every Friday. If you're not getting it, see me before you leave here today. I want you to get that. That is your go-to guide about what's going on in healthcare in Alabama and what affects your practice. The third leg of the stool. People always groan sometimes when I talk about this. ALAPAC, political contributions. This is absolutely critical. You see an organization that does not have one of these 3 legs in good working order, and you will see an organization that's not effective in advancing its agenda or defending against the attacks that are on that profession. ALAPAC, the Alabama Medical PAC, voluntary contributions from physicians. It's the official PAC of the association, 17-member board of directors of physicians. We're looking at pro-medicine candidates for office. Sometimes you have to take a broad approach to things. You know, we take issues on a case-by-case basis. We've got some senators and some House members that are with us on some things and not on others. We want to have good relationships with all those people. The PAC board and with the help of the staff help vet candidates to figure out how they are on issues. Voting records, we keep detailed charts and information to figure out over a 4-year period where are these guys, where do they stand. If you don't have somebody who's got a voting record, it's critical that we gather intelligence, which is what we do as well, to report to the board so they can make an educated decision. These contributions help pay for polling, campaigns, staff, consultants. The average state house race, just to give you an idea, we're talking about the request from ALAPAC board is $200 per year per position, $17 a month if you've seen the chart out front, $17. That's a decent lunch in a lot of places. The average state house race is $200,000 now. A lot of that's driven by media and consultants that are oftentimes good, sometimes they run the tab up, but the reality is the race costs $200,000 on average. A state senate race is about twice that on average. Some, this last cycle, individual races went more than $1 million each on either side. We're talking about real dollars, big dollars here. A lot at stake. Because those are the people that make the decisions. Again, we go back to one of the first things I said that determine how you practice your profession or don't practice. Critically, it's the third leg of the stool. So that's, we could say that, you know, it's important because it's the third leg. But we've got to have allies at the State House and Congress that will help us and work on issues. It's hard to encapsulate you know, a House member or a Senate member when they look at the broad spectrum of people out there. We talked about there's auto parts dealers, there's lawyers in the legislature. Well, Alabama's full of different professions as well. The ALAPAC is one of the most respected PACs because it is strictly volunteer contribution from physicians. There's no other money, there's no gambling money, no AEA money, there's none of those other things. It's strictly physician money. It's well respected, and I think that also harkens back to the fact that your profession is very well respected. But one of the realities is we often don't capitalize on that enough. You know, you are leaders in your community, whether you recognize it or not, and I think it's critical that you exercise that. If you're giving to your PAC, if you're contacting your legislator, and you've got an organization that, like ours, that is growing in an umbrella organization that covers a lot of different specialties as well, your involvement in the political process says you care about the issues before that body. If they don't hear from you, if you're not active in the PAC, it says by default that you don't care about what's going on in the profession. I'm a hands-off approach. Whatever happens, happens. It's not a big deal. It's not worth my time. That's the message that is sent. Whether it's meant or not, I don't think it's meant by a lot. I think a lot of positions are frustrated with the process, and we're frustrated with it every day. I mean, it is a herding of cats, if you will, on a daily basis at the legislature. You get a promise that some things are going to go this way. 2 minutes later, we're going the opposite direction, 180 degrees, because somebody talked to somebody who talked to somebody that knew somebody that said this was a bad idea. And so that's a constant process. It's triaging, if you will, in the halls of the State House. But ALPAC, again, the third leg of the stool, critical to have a strong political action committee to be able to get folks that are pro-medicine, that are allies of ours elected to office, defend those folks when they come in and they're under attack by a challenger in their races. It's $200 a year, as we talked about. You really can't afford not to join ALPAC. And I'll just mention too on there, we had a new state law that passed that corporate contributions are now permissible as well. They were at one time limited, but now they're, if you want your group to do a contribution instead of individually round up your partners, you can do that as well. So three-legged advocacy still one more time. Remember, without all the legs in good working order, we've got a pile of toothpicks. I always like this quote because I think it really applies to the medical profession. The person who says that he is above politics is really saying that democracy is beneath. It's a system we have. It's not perfect. It's better than any of the other ones in this world. So we have to work within those bounds. Questions, comments, fruit thrown at me, something to do. Surely I stirred somebody to a question of some kind of comment.
I want to go. So
Yeah.
earlier when you were talking about lobbying, you said that you look through the bills and try to determine what's best for medicine. Who tells you what's best for medicine?
Board of Censors and the House of Delegates. You know, the House of Delegates, unfortunately, the timing of it is they meet usually about 9 months before the next session. So on a daily basis, a month-to-month basis, you're looking at the Board of Censors. The individuals that you elect as a member of the association at the House of Delegates to represent you. Those individuals, members of the board, are making those policy decisions. And some of them are perennial issues. Once we know the stance on the Benign bill, we know therefore that we're opposed to bills like that. Dr. Rodney, you had a question?
Mr. Corley, excellent presentation. Thank you very much. If an organization that supported this endeavor wanted to introduce legislation, methodological, how would we accomplish that?
I said the best thing is to talk to your district censor. I mean, to get the association support behind it, you're going to need the Board of Censors behind it. You're going to need the Board of Censors to say this is an issue that is a big enough problem that we need to take action to move forward. And that's, locally you've got, Dr. Franks. I mean, Dr. Getty, that's right. Bill Getter and Dr. Franks too. Dr. Franks being in Mobile, Dr. Getter over in Baldwin County. I'd start locally and move from there. That's the best way.
And locally with our representatives?
No, I wouldn't do that yet, but the issue being, what people are always trying to determine in the process is where all the parks are. So what you want to do, at least from medicine standpoint, the best approach is not to have a different message, but to go through the Board of Censors so that, say the College of Surgeons is an issue that you're very keen on.
Correct.
To make sure that the Board of Censors is in that same position as well. That's the best case. Otherwise, you're going to have legislators to say, they'll tell me, I get it all the time. Well, so-and-so is not okay with this. I got a call from them, and so-and-so over here, you're telling me that it's good doctors, and you'll go this too sometimes from members of the legislature. So it gives us a more unified approach, which is far and away more, that's a much better way to do it.
Right. If that's stage one, what's stage two be?
Oh, well, once you've got the Board of Censors behind you, then it's time to start contacting the legislature to develop a strategy. That's where we come in on the strategic part from the lobbying effort is let's figure out who our tough folks are. Where are our easy votes? Where are our go-to people that we know are going to be with us no matter what on these issues? Let's use them and get them to talk to their peers as well. And then from there, let's figure out where the tough folks are and have some individual visits from them. And this is broad speaking.
I understand. Not right.
No.
How, who, and what, how, when would you write the legislation?
Talking about the specifics of the bill.
Right.
Well, that would be what I would think you would hash out with Dr. Franks, with Dr. Getter locally, and just saying you being from Mobile. And make sure that they're on board, because you want to do that before going forward. In any specialty, we're just talking college surgeons right now, I know you're a strong advocate for that organization. But any organization, that would be the way to approach it, would be to, whatever your issue is, let's bring to the Board of Censors, because, I mean, we're the largest organization statewide representing physicians, and we've got different factions within our organization who want different things at different times, and our approach is let's find a way to work that stuff out so that everybody benefits.
Would you not write a resolution and then bring it to your district caucus meeting?
You could, that's certainly a way to approach it. I mean, again, y'all have elected, this kind of goes to what we're talking about here. Y'all have elected those members of the board to represent you in the same sense that you represent, I mean, you elect House and Senate members that are representative of your beliefs. And your guy doesn't always get elected, but at least in the House and Senate. Does he? Yes, not really.
So this is the 4th year that I've been here. You guys really put on a good, agenda, and I'm starting to know the representatives and been involved in some of their campaigns to see them get actually elected, so they know me now and everything else. But still, we're faced with this overwhelming budget deficit, and that's all they're interested in. And it's I get the sense that it's overwhelming. Last year, every year for the last 3 years, they've said we can't do anything because we've got this budget deficit. That's the overwhelming thing.
And that is a big issue, no question. I remember 6 or 7 years ago, we had an entire session deal with a local Macon County bingo bill. So oftentimes they'll use various issues to not have, big issues, to not have to deal with some of the issues that we think are important. But you're right, the tax issues right now are very important. The general fund is, anybody's guess anywhere from $300 million to $700-something million deficit. We owe some money back to Medicaid. There are increasing demands on the prison system, on Medicaid itself, to fund the current population, and all the all the state departments out there as well.
So like some of our legislative agenda, raising the Medicaid rates up to Medicare levels. I mean, that's, when we talk about that, all they can say is we've got a big budget deficit and we're anti taxes. And even if we did do a cigarette tax, that tax is all going to go into the general fund. It's not going to go to increase Medicaid rates.
I think that, I hear what you're saying. I think you're talking about when you're going to get into conversations with your legislators later and they counter with these tax proposals. From the organization standpoint, and I think members of the board and anyone who feels the need to speak up, please do. We've got several here. But just because something is not the primo issue of the legislature does not mean we shouldn't be raising it. We will never advance the things that we think are important if we just rely on them to determine what the course of the session is going to be. On the tax issue, particularly with Medicaid rates, we all recognize and know that these RCOs are now going to take over Medicaid. Well, the physicians in the system have got to be key and part of that. I mean, as I understand it, hospital care is the most expensive part of any health plan. Right. So if you've got physicians that are well trained and can keep patients out of the hospital, they're trying to attract more physicians to the system. Think about the SGR. I mean, it's the same response every year for 17 years now on the SGR. Yes. Well, we'll do it later. We've got a big deficit and we haven't had a budget in 6 years, but we're going to push it. That doesn't mean that we don't keep pushing on it and make it an issue of being on board, even if it has a cost, something like that. Right. Because every bill is about those. And they have an interest in seeing that Medicaid system work properly. They have an interest in doing that. They instituted reforms, quite frankly, for the purposes of moving some of the liability off their books onto the additional care organizations. That was one of the big pushes behind it, was this is a growing cost to the state. We need to somehow offload some of this liability to make the people providing the care have some skin in the game. That was quite frankly, their key intent, their main push behind it.
Right, and I think NASA spoke very effectively, on those discussions and that area. So I'm looking forward to seeing, Don Williamson talk later and asking some questions about that.
Absolutely.
But I guess the key issue that I'm raising is, I mean, really, where do we stand? What progress can we make given this budget deficit? Is the governor going to expand Medicaid? Is there any thoughts of expanding Medicaid at this point in time? You know, I mean, that's the federal dollars, it's a lot of dollars.
Definitely
And
is.
of course, we've got a Supreme Court decision that may come down to suggest that the state exchanges are going to be not supported. So we've got all this uncertainty.
Best time to be involved.
Best
Reason
time to be involved. Yeah.
I agree, I don't have a crystal ball to tell you what he's gonna do on that. I really don't. You know, he just appointed a healthcare task force, kind of a long-term study committee, and there's some thought that perhaps maybe something comes out of that, to that point. I don't know. I wish I did. I think, you know, we do that, we'll probably be out working on that, and we don't know the end result.
Do we have any members on that?
There's several doctors, I don't know if anyone, yeah, Dr. Franks is on it, Dr. Harris, are you on it? Dr. Track instead out of Birmingham is on the board as well, she is on it.
Dr. Waits from Centerville's on it, Dr. Waite from Tuscaloosa's on
Right,
it.
right. So we'll see what comes out of that. I mean, that, I don't know what's going to come out of that application, quite frankly. I've got conflicting reports on the purpose of it. I know what the resolution said, or I know what the executive order said, I know what the news reports said, but 30-some odd people trying to make clear healthcare vision for the future of Alabama is a herd of cats. The members on the board in here notwithstanding.
In here standing, we'll have strike.
I have to be sitting in this stuff.
Yeah, strike camels.
Niko, changing slightly, when we are lobbying and we're advocating for positions, how do we avoid being too negative on these allied health professions, that sort of thing?
I think, I mean,
Or looking bad by putting them down?
well, I mean, your chief concern is taking care of your patients. You know, that's what you went to medical school to do. You have an interest in it. You want to keep those patients as healthy and safe as possible. At the same time, you don't want to have to clean up somebody else's mess, as I've been told, pretty frankly in that sense. And despite the fact that we'll get pushback, we do every year on some of those scope issues. If it's not in the interest of the patient, it shouldn't be done. And we have to maintain that position. And we have to say it's not safe, it's not proper. They don't have the requisite training. They don't have the years of education that physicians may have. And I think we can stand firm on that. We'll have people that agree with us every year, and we have people that will disagree with us. You know, but quite frankly, those that disagree, it's a question of education. Their education on the issue, not being well versed on it, not understanding that 48 other states have done this, why shouldn't Alabama do it? That's one of my favorite things, is when somebody throws up how many other states do something. So I say, well, you know how legislatures work. Just one more vote on the yes column versus the no column means that something, does that mean it had widespread support when it passed? No. So it's an education issue. Right.
I think I would add to that is that what we're advocating is a collaborative approach, so that the team works together with the physician providing the oversight of that team, and that we want the various healthcare professions to be able to practice, take care of their patients, et cetera. But we've got to make sure that we're integrated and coordinated so we don't waste healthcare dollars. And the best way to do that, we think, is have the physician maximally involved in the oversight of that care. And then it's less of a one side versus the other. It's that the patient's at the center and we're working together to provide that best care for the patient.
Everybody wants to be a doctor, but nobody wants to
I
be a
can
member.
appreciate that, but I see a creep of their confidence upward, and I'm an imager, so I see unneeded tests being ordered by people who are inadequately educated. And I guess that's what we have to just say.
Yeah, and I think, again, it comes down to, and Jimmy and I, you and I have spoken together about this, and you and I have as well. But I think once you do, you don't have to have in my opinion, you don't have to have a bill that you're working on to be doing a long-term educational strategy and process. I think that's key on a lot of these issues because, quite frankly, it's so technical.